I'm very pleased to welcome this morning to join you in the panel, Emma Newman, the CRO for PubMatic EMEA, Viktor Zawadzki, the General Manager EMEA and APAC for MediaMath, and Olli Järvilehto from Relevant Digital. Good morning, or good afternoon rather, to you all.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for taking the time. There's so many things to discuss and sadly so little time. I want to take a step back and start with Daniel so that he can put things into further context. As a short first comment, Daniel, and this of course is a question that I will ask your views as well. The ISBA study was very much talked about. Indeed, it was highlighted across the industry and even won an IAB Europe Research Award on Tuesday. How did this study change the discussion in terms of programmatic transparency? And if we take a step back, is there a definitional issue? I don't want to get too philosophical, even though this is a national hobby because we invented this. I do want you to address this, and within that context, be clear about the benefits for publishers and advertisers, and potentially mention a couple of use cases which you think show the direction we should be heading. A short comment from you, Daniel, before we move to our guests.
It was clearly a very important study that has, I think, brought to the foreground, or kind of, let's say, consolidated a lot of talk that was going on about supply chain transparency. And there were different forums in which this was being discussed, but everyone united around the study as a focal point of discussion. To me, the main takeaway from the study is how hard it is, even for experts, for auditing experts, for data experts, to match the data. So it's not about what the study found, but it's about what it didn't find, what it wasn't able to find. And we know that the vast majority of data couldn't be matched because it came from different systems, and also different participants in the market had different proficiency in supplying the relevant data. And I believe that a lot of the questions that have been sparked by that study about how transparent is programmatic, that they will be addressed, and they will go, well, they will turn from questions into answers that can provide the basis for better supply chain if we standardize and harmonize and enhance the way the matching between data can take place.
Emma, first comment from you.
Yeah, so I think that, look, of all the issues dominating ad tech discussions, transparency is the one that concerns buyers this year, and is certainly something that the industry is investing a great deal of time into to tackle. In the long run, I think the topic of transparency is really about trust. So trust in programmatic, trust in vendors, trusting the emerging channels, especially in-app and CTV, and overall trust in the industry. And the issue of transparency has given rise to supply path optimization, also known as SPO. And we've seen a lot more agencies across our region looking to address transparency across the supply chain, across the fee structures, and across inventory itself, which leads agencies and brands to reassess their vendor relationships as they look to develop deeper partnerships with fewer trusted suppliers that can deliver value across the chain. And these transparency discussions are absolutely merited, because without transparency, we cannot have trust. And without trust, we cannot evolve. And we've also talked about how the industry needs to work collectively to ensure that the solutions that we take to market work for everyone. They don't result in an unfair advantage for those with the loudest voices or the largest resources. It's this approach, I think, that's at the basis of initiatives like the IAB Europe Supply Chain Transparency Guide, as.txt, appas.txt, as.txt for CTV now, and you've got supply chain objects, sellers.json, buyers.json, IAB Gold Standards 2.0, and of course, JIC Web Standards. And I think having that itself tells you how seriously we're taking this as an industry. And many of these initiatives have had the aim of creating a smoother way brand investment to reach publishers, and as such will continue to have an increasing benefit in enabling publishers to effectively monetize their inventory.
Thank you, Emma. Viktor, a comment from you.
Yeah, great. Like, Daniel, thanks for the presentation. I was just wondering what we should talk about after you talk. You said everything basically. So let's see if we can add a few thoughts. The ISB study had a funny timing for us because we've been working since some time on an initiative which we call Source. The idea behind that is to say, we know ecosystem, programmatic ecosystem is murky. I should not say that, but that's what it is. It's never been set up to become $1 trillion industry. And now is there where we are, right? And working on pipes which are breaking easily in transparency, inconsistency, and so on. And David, you said, Daniel, you said it, getting information and aligning across the whole chain is close to impossible. We came up with this initiative, started in end of 2019. The ISBA study came up and basically talked to exactly the points which we've been addressing with it, to say, the new programmatic pipes needs to be addressable, they need to be accountable, they need to be aligned. And what we've done basically is to say we got 3 points across each of that component, which we are going to measure the industry on ourselves, but as well, especially our supply partners, with the goal of making the whole supply chain as transparent as possible, transparent in the end to end. It's great to have PubMatic there, and we closely work together. PubMatic is, I think, one of the most advanced partners where we collaborate. And the benefit for agencies and advertisers is to say, I put money into a DSP, and usually it's hard to see from the other end of the supply chain, like from an SSP, like PubMatic side, to see like how much budget is available, what's the goal of a campaign, how much it spends, what can I do from my side to optimize in an automated way? This is all very manual still, right? So we built that end-to-end connection, including supply fees transparency, including SPO, including an automated sync for campaign KPIs. And that all in the time when the ISBA study came out, and so like, where's my 15%, which was another component coming to the board. So since then, the whole world turned much quicker on that topic. And what we've seen basically from the initiative going directly to the source is that clients tests and pilots, which we did, significantly improve not only performance, but as well all the good things which you look at as an advertiser, starting from working media reduction between 10 to 30% in terms of, or increase of, I should say, by 10 to 30% in working media. We've seen KPIs improvement on a 2-digit level. And that's something which we see like is the way the market should go, creating and Emma, you called out all the initiatives, which are quite many, I'm just realizing, meanwhile, which helping to get us there, to benefit publishers, but as well advertisers, and simply grow as well. Daniel, as you called it, the free independent internet, if that was the term. I don't want to put anything in your mouth, but that's something I think you said, which we are all part of.
Thank you, Victor. There's a couple of points we will certainly return to, but first a comment from Olli.
Yeah, thank you. Quite exhaustive, extensive sort of coverage from both Emma and Victor already. But I think from the ISBA study, the main point shouldn't be the unknown delta, because I think that can be explained away. But the issue is definitely the fact that, okay, how can we actually match such a small amount of impressions across the ad tech ecosystem? And I feel that's something that we should definitely focus on as an industry, and to make sure that we can actually increase that rate, because then we will know what happens in the ecosystem and can gain the trust from advertisers as well. And I'm actually glad that you, Daniel, brought up the pre-bid information from yesterday, because with the pre-bid 5 update coming and requiring actually to specify or at least have a placeholder for an advertiser domain there, it will actually make it a lot easier to actually to get this information to pass through the ecosystem. And yeah, and I think actually what sellers.json and the actual seller's guide is a really good initiative from Premise to go in and check basically what's taking place on the different publisher domains. So there's a lot of good initiatives going on the market at the moment, and we're moving in the right direction, but we need to unify and normalize data. That's the main point.
Yeah, I will return to that, but taking a step back, I really appreciated that we're trying to shift the discussion from supply chain to value chain, because historically we've spoken a lot about cost this, tax that, and I always felt we did not focus enough on value, risking of being reminiscent of the Oscar Wilde quote of the cynic that knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. So this is a very healthy and positive dynamic, but what are the biggest hurdles in this direction from supply chain to value chain and in what we're trying to achieve? Daniel, I don't know if you want to go first.
I think one of the things is really what to focus on first. Is it auditing? Is it working media and so forth? There needs to be an agreement of which topic to address first to drive value. And I think it helps to broaden the discussion a little bit, because we are in the industry and also from an external view, primarily thinking about programmatic as a transaction infrastructure of buying and selling media. But the wonderful thing is, if you look at any literature on the internet since the beginning of the 90s, is about something interactive, right? We're not calling ourselves interactive media anymore, but we're forgetting about the feedbacks, the valuable interaction that a programmatic value chain enables. It's right, for instance, an example for a publisher, if they have transparent data, they can't just use the value chain to enhance their yield, but they can strategically see who are the best working buyers, which advertisers should one have more strategic relationships with, and so forth. So seeing this infrastructure also as a source of business intelligence. So I think there are many of these types of things that we should talk about, because if we just bog ourselves down into audit trails, into kind of working media, these are, in the broader scheme of things, fairly fragmented discussions. And I think the first thing to do is really to understand the intelligence potential that a clean programmatic value chain affords.
Emma.
Yeah, I think value, like the word transparency, means different things to different people. So what I consider valuable, somebody else won't. So I think it's really understanding what value means to all of to everybody in the chain, from the publisher through to the buyer and the brand. I think that and until we really understand that, it's very difficult to deliver what people are looking for. I think there is such a broad set of needs that developing some kind of standards that create and then maintain a level playing field to ensure that every reputable player has a fair chance of success is, I think that's probably one of the most important things. And we've talked a lot about there isn't standardization. So we can't measure apples with apples right now. So who can say who's delivering value and who isn't if we're not being measured in the same way, we're not using the same taxonomy, we're not delivering data in the same way? It's partly the reason why the study took such a long time, which is all of the players were very open and transparent and we shared everything that we could share, but we're all sharing it in a different way, and that makes it really difficult. So until we've got some degree of standardization and some understanding of what value actually means, because it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody, and people aren't looking for the same thing when they talk about value, then it's going to be very difficult to demonstrate that.
True. Victor.
I don't want to become philosophical as well, so stop me there. When I speak to especially digital marketers, which is a different conversation when you speak to CMOs or, let's say, the general marketers, there is a obsession with digital KPIs, which might sound a little funny, but let me explain a little more. Right, so let's say the focus on numbers from tools like Google Analytics, which are completely or looked at in a completely separate, siloed way of how the world works, and often the lack of connecting what in digital reports to your financial results is something which is a huge challenge for, I think, for us as an industry. It still is, at least like that's personal experience over the last couple of years, and that's something which will be interesting to watch how it will develop starting next year, when the super weapon third-party cookie and still aligned measurement or consistent measurement to a certain point at least will simply go away, and we're going to find ways to solve it in a probably much more fragmented but not only. So the upper part, when you look at the supply chain and the cost chain basically, and about what you said, to say like, what's the value on every, with really building the right pipes and creating transparency for every player. And it starts with a cutting exercise to say, identify players who are not adding value first and foremost. And that's a much, much easier exercise to do. All the SPO work, which you're all doing, is definitely crucial. Where it's becoming interesting is to put a certain monetary or quantified value to maybe only every transaction ideally, but at least like to every partner. And that's something where you can speak to media and speak to, let's say, all the fees which are happening in the supply chain. It's getting harder to say what's the value of an audience segment, for example, or a contextual segment. And it's getting even much harder to say what's the value of a DCO provider versus another one. So when we started to talk to clients about transparency, the first answer has been like, don't be an idiot and believe that this has a value in itself, because it doesn't, which is clear on one hand. I'm sorry. The other, excuse me, next conversation has been, when we increase working media, Jesus, how does that, oh Jesus, I have to stop, I'm sorry.
Well, we'll go to Olli and you'll continue right after. Olli.
Yeah, thanks. With that Relevant, we work with publishers quite closely and actually help them make sense out of the data that they get from the various SSP partners they work with. So we, on a daily basis, there are several dozen of SSPs that we import data from into a platform, and it is quite a wide range of different types of interpretations of data that comes, and there's quite a lot of normalization that needs to be done actually to make some sense out of that data, especially with advertiser naming conventions. If you want to understand how you need to have a big advertiser mapping in place, because they're named completely differently in all platforms. Goes down to DSP seats even. They're named differently across the board. And obviously, yes, we can stitch the data together and provide insights to publishers so they can generate value actually out of it and get some actionable insights out of it. But it would maybe be a lot easier if it was standardized. But yeah, there is definitely a lot of value to be gained from actually understanding how are the different agencies, how are the different advertisers buying, and which pipes do they use actually. Well, looking at from some supply path optimization from another perspective, basically demand path optimization, which are the best routes for a publisher where the advertisers buy from.
If I could just jump in for 2 seconds, I
Sure.
think it's very important what Olli said about the standardization, right? So what is being standardized? There's an entire cottage industry around this, SSP aggregators that do their own mappings. They're very valuable work. But the most thing is that these mappings are static, and different companies, advertisers, publishers, they have different business logics. So there needs to be an industry-wide mapping, now like that is industry certified, on which everybody can then build their own business logic. Because different teams also inside the company, a finance team will have a different mapping or different logic than an ad ops team, for instance. As the CMO wants something different than the buying team. I think that is the thing that needs to be done. It's not about just another mapping, but about a standardized mapping on which everybody can build their own view of the truth as it pertains to their business.
Yeah, would have been, it's a good segue, if you like, to my final question, because we are pressed for time, which means there's plentiful data. How much is it standardized, and how can we get to that holy grail of the single source of truth? And what are the key actions, indeed, that tech solution providers are taking to get us in that direction? So I will start off with Emma, and I will finish with you, Daniel. Emma.
So look, I think that there's a collective responsibility here, right? So it's not, everybody in the chain has to work together to do this. And I think that's the most important thing, because if you've only got one or two partners in the steps, in the elements of the chain working on this, then we're not going to get to where we need to get to. I think from an SSP perspective, if you think my view of what a good SSP does is it dedicates resources to develop tools that create, better user experiences, that create solutions that put publishers in control of their inventory, that create algorithms that are capable of ingesting and understanding more and more data as it becomes available. Because the one thing we don't lack is data. And all of these things lead to cleaner supply paths and then build trust among the media buying community. that independent solutions are a viable alternative to the walled gardens. And we can only do this if we work together to create an open solution, not one that is owned by a single company. Another walled garden solution isn't going to benefit anybody apart from the walled garden. And for me, a big part of this is opening up lines for communication and including brands in those communications and those conversations. And that will help facilitate better decisioning around which SSPs are best suited to any given brand.
True, true. Thank you for this, Emma. Victor, you're feeling okay?
Yes, I'm sorry for that. Jesus.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It happens.
Good. Okay,
It happens.
thanks.
Well,
Thanks for your patience with me.
good to see you, I have to say. Please,
and good to hear me as well. Like, anyway,
a concluding comment from your part.
I'm happy to do that. I think we started to build new pipes and new ecosystem. Industry initiatives is one thing. We did it at MediaMath, and one outcome, one result, which we're working on, is scoring across supply partners across nine different KPIs actually. One is for sure fee transparency, but the other as well, like the signals that we are sending back and forth, fraud, and other types like unique channel identifiers, which we basically put into the value chain, as we should call it right now. And that's something which is really day and night between what we've seen over the last couple of years to what we're seeing right now. And every SSP, again, like calling out PubMatic here, but it's also really engaged with us and working towards the ideal state of being accountable, addressable, and especially aligned to create value for advertisers and agencies, is something which we see as our not only obligation, but as well the mission and the vision for us as an industry, which we want to drive actually.
Okay, thank you. Olli, a final comment from you.
Yeah, I think it's in general, there are a lot of good steps going on in the industry, and we just need to work together. And as Emma said, we need to make sure that the walled gardens are not the only alternative. We need to be viable, and we need to get the trust from the buyers in order to get that.
Yeah. All right. No, this is quite clear. Daniel, as we wrap up the panel, I don't know if you want to make a final comment.
I think if we look at media in the past, not just programmatic, there was always this adage where there's mystery, there is margin. This isn't the case anymore, or it won't be the case anymore in the future. So transparency is actually a key differentiator to create value. And I echo what all the other panelists said, that there are many positive developments like the ones that Victor and Emma outlined, but it is crucial to move that from vendor to vendor relationships to an entire industry, because only then can programmatic grow from the 7.9 billion to the 10 billions and so forth, and be that viable alternative to the walled gardens that it should be.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel. And again, warmest thanks to Emma, Victor, and Olli for joining us today. I think it's quite clear in terms of the direction we need to be taking to be making progress, or to continue with our progress. And it's also, permit me to say, evident that IAB Europe is an ideal locus for discussions and debates to take place. So thank you all. Thank you all for joining us.